Welcome to Wiser Dialogue, conversations with women of color about issues, policies, and research that impact our lives. Today's guests are Santiba Campbell and Tamara Jeffries. Santiba is an assistant professor of social psychology at Bennett College, and Tamara is an associate professor of journalism at Bennett College. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
So today we're going to talk about strategies for the challenges that we might face in 2019. A Forbes article reports that by February, most folks have already defaulted on their New Year's resolutions. So I thought that given the work that Tamara and Santiba have been doing around making yoga more accessible to women of color and mindfulness, they would be a great set of folks to start the new year to talk about some strategies. So Santiba, I'd like to start with you. So your work, your academic research has focused on the social identity development among historical targets of racism, with a particular focus on African Americans, and how racial identity and perception of racial discrimination impact well-being. So could you tell us a little bit about how that research connects to the work that you and Tamara have been doing around yoga?
Absolutely. So the overall focus has been on college students, whether or not college students are successful and satisfied. And along the way, I learned that oftentimes students may have great GPAs, but aren't psychologically satisfied. So that sense of accomplishment is coming into play. Then I partnered up with Tamara, and we realized that this isn't something that we're just seeing within college students. We're in a pretty special environment, having young women of color, predominantly Black, at the campus that we work at. And we found out that other Black women in the community, so not just college-age Black women, but Black women, period, we're dealing with some of these stressors that can impact different ideas of success and satisfaction post-graduation as well.
So Santiba, you mentioned that they weren't satisfied. Could you tell us a little bit more about what that means?
Sure. Oftentimes in academic research, when it comes to looking at student success, we often focus on GPAs and graduation. But there's a lot that happens in between whether or not a student has a high or a particular level of GPA in graduation. Oftentimes some students can graduate and they don't have that amazing GPA, but they're just as excited. Or we affectionately like to call this that thank you laude, right? So you're not necessarily graduating cum laude or magna cum, but you thank you laude. But if you're the first person in your family to graduate, it's still a major accomplishment, even if your GPA is a 2.8. So that's that kind of disconnect that we're noticing in the literature. So we can't just look at student success and say, these students graduated, they must be fulfilled. Because some of these students graduate with high levels of anxiety and also the potential for depression once they start their actual careers.
Okay, so one of the other things that you mentioned, and Tamara, I'll ask for your comments on this as well. You said stressors. So what are you finding as some of the stressors?
Well, in particular to our campus, like I said, being on a campus that's predominantly Black, women of color, from all different races and ethnicities, race. You know, racism is real, and racism is a stressor that is oftentimes, I think, not seen as detrimental as it really is. If you look in the psychology literature, we have concepts of race battle fatigue, race-based stress-induced traumas, different type of psychological distress that also comes from race. So by being that historical target that you mentioned earlier, at any given moment, we can be impacted by race. I mean, just recently, here's another incident of a gentleman in a hotel lobby calling his mom on the phone, and the cops get called on. Okay. So when we're constantly in environments where we have to be cognizantly aware of what's going on, it leads to these levels of anxiety, right? Where you actually have to think about, will my race impact this situation?
Okay, thank you. So Tamara, so you've spent 30 years as a journalist, writing narratives about women's health, well-being, and self-care. So tell us a little bit about how you go from being a journalist, writing in that space, to now collaborating with Santiba and looking at yoga and making it more accessible. And as I've understood from conversations with you, not only by race, but also by body type.
So the thing that I say to people all the time is that we are, as journalists, we're researchers also. So the years of doing the journalistic work has been looking at some of the trends, has been looking at talking to the people who are doing the academic research and producing the data. So there's not that much of a leap between what I was doing before and what I'm doing now. The other part of what are the specifics of what I was doing in terms of health has always been, or largely been, around African-American women, African-American families in general, but specifically African-American women. And so over the course of the years, what you see is this stress load, what they call an allostatic load. And you see that women have it. One of the things that I've written about is, Santiba mentioned the guy in the lobby, and we see a lot in the news about the war on Black men. But one of the things that has come up in the public health research and public health literature is how our fears for our husbands, brothers, children have an impact on us and on our health. So anything that's causing us to be stressed is increasing that allostatic load, and therefore having an impact on our health.
Talk to us a little bit about how you've gone from being a journalist to being a social psychologist, and then thinking about getting certified as a yoga instructor, because I don't think most of us see those as connections, like wouldn't make that connection.
For me, it was my graduate studies. Graduate school was very stressful, and I needed an outlet. I started working with a physical therapy graduate student who introduced me to Vinyasa yoga. And that's how my yoga journey began. And I was in a bit of a slump when I got to Bennett College in regards to my yoga practice, met Tamara, who was already a yogi, and said, let's start practicing back together. And one of the things that I learned from practicing with Tamara was, how much I needed to be back on the mat again, practicing yoga, but B, the fact that I hadn't been practicing yoga, I've been doing yoga. And the doing versus practicing is a huge component. And that's how together we started turning a passion or something we love doing into an actual research idea, because Tamara was very adamant in saying our students need this. And that's how I believe the yoga began.
And when did you become certified? How recent is yours?
Maybe 2 summers ago. So after I started doing the work with Tamara, I realized, and that was that whole idea of doing versus practicing. Being, an academic, I figured the best way I could understand doing versus practicing is get the certification. So I didn't necessarily go into the certification saying, hey, I want to teach yoga classes. I needed to understand the culture. What are we talking about? And just like with the academy, yoga doesn't end. So yes, we're both certified, but we're often going to workshops, other teachings and trainings to learn more and understand not just necessarily the practice, but the historical significance of yoga as a whole.
Santiba raises a good point. The yoga certification process is, for me, it was a year-long, not a full year, but a year-long off and on process. It's a 200-hour certification at minimum. And in that certification, you're learning not only the yoga poses and the breathing and what have you, but you're learning some history, you're learning anatomy and that kind of thing. And so
Sanskrit.
That we had Sanskrit. And one of the things that happened as part of my training is that I had to write a research paper. And as part of writing the paper, one of the things is looking at the research around yoga and the health benefits of yoga. Obviously, I was going to look at the health benefits because that's what I do. And so when you start to look at the research, one of the things that you see, and we've been at workshops where it's been admitted that the yoga research doesn't include Black folks.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that inclusion of Black folks. So both of you are at Bennett College. You're now teaching yoga there to the young women. I believe this is a course credit class. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How has that changed your campus? What is some of the feedback that you're hearing from some of the young ladies? What are their concerns? So I want to let's kind of start with some myths that you around yoga. So I know, Tamara, from some of our conversations that you get, can I do yoga if I'm a Christian? So can I do yoga if I'm a Christian and I believe in God? Can I do yoga?
Yes, you can do yoga. And that's one of the things when Santiba talks about us as academics doing research. I just took a Hinduism class so I could understand a little bit more about Hindu culture a little bit more deeply. And what comes out of that study is that it is not, yoga itself is not a religion, and there's nothing in it that says that you could not do the practice. But given the concerns that our students have, there are things that I do modify when I'm teaching. So, for example, students I found were unnerved by the use of a lot of Sanskrit. So if I use the Sanskrit terms for the poses, they were less comfortable, so I don't use them. I use the English terms for those. I don't chant. I don't have a problem chanting. I go to yoga classes where there's a chant, but I don't chant in the classes because we have a large number. We have at Bennett, and Santiba can help me with the numbers. When we first offered the class, the first year that we offered the class, we had 70 students. We only have under 500 students on campus. So 70 students in that first year, and every year that we teach it, and we've been doing this since 2016, every semester that we teach it, the class fills up. There are 30 people in class, and this year I will have taught 4 classes of 30 people. So we've got a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds. I've got Muslim students. I have other people of other nationalities. So I'm trying to take that into consideration when I'm offering the yoga so that it can be, so that people can feel comfortable in the space.
So so that's one myth. I'm a Christian. Yes, I can do yoga. What are some of the other concerns that the young women are bringing as they're coming in about practicing yoga?
There's a concern about body size. We're a Black women's campus, and some of my students have already gained their freshman 15. And I've also gained my freshman 15 after 10 years there. We want to make sure that people understand that yoga is a holistic practice. So what I do is I've developed, the curriculum I've developed is called Whole Yoga, where we talk about not just the physical movements, because people think that you have to be able to touch your toes or put your foot behind your head or something like that, which you don't. Yoga is not only the physical practice, it is breathing, it is the meditation, it is some lifestyle things, how you approach other people, how you live your life. And so we incorporate that into the teaching to take some of the emphasis off of body, but also make sure that as we're doing it, we do modifications for people in bigger bodies and what have you. And what I find interestingly, a lot of times the women in the bigger bodies are actually even more able to do some of the poses than some of my my more svelte students. And they're surprised at their capability, but I think that also the seeing their capabilities, whatever their body size is, increases their sense of confidence on and off the mat.
Santiba, how are the students responding? Like, what are you hearing conversations, not just about maybe how they're feeling and their excitement, as Tamara said, you know, from a variety of ways to be able to do the poses, but in your interactions with them, do they seem less stressed? Does it seem that yoga is really helping them?
Absolutely. On a surface level, we can see it just from the participation and engagement. So outside of Tamara teaching the 4-credit PE course, she also has requests to teach things like trap yoga. So that was interesting where, you know, here's after 5. So I believe the event was at 6, 7 o'clock at night. And the students actually requested her to come into the dorms to teach trap yoga. So, you know, for those of you who may not be familiar, the difference with trap yoga is basically the soundtrack. So traditional yogis, you know, we practice without music, but for trap yoga, you know, you're doing yoga to Cardi B playing in the background. So for some of us, we may not find it relaxing, but, you know, for the students, if this is what they want, of course, we're going to give them what we want. And psychology department, we have our own club as well that's come to us and said, hey, we want to learn more about mindfulness. So we've had mindfulness coloring nights where we literally have, you know, adult coloring sheets and we just color and chat and dialogue, and it's pretty nice. So on the surface level, the participation is there because we keep getting requests to have events. Looking at it from an empirical standpoint, we actually just finished working on a publication looking at what's going on with our research on campus. And we found that amongst coping strategies that our students are reporting, they're saying yoga. We also have a lot of students saying things like breathing. And we know that them saying that I'm taking a moment to breathe is coming from their participation in the yoga class, because with the sample that we assessed, around 80 to 82% of the students were either in the yoga class or had participated in the yoga class at some point. So here's a novice group of people who may have not had any interaction with yoga, now reporting out that they use yoga or breathing as a coping mechanism. So I look at that as a very positive starting point for us. Moving forward, however, we would like to do an intervention study. So let's actually look at the students longitudinal over the course of an academic year. So get them in a yoga class in the fall, and let's see if it's impacting their studies in the spring. And that's next up on our agenda to do.
I want to thank my guests, Santiba Campbell and Tamara Jeffries. Both are professors at Bennett College. You have been watching Wiser Dialogue, The Missing Viewpoint.